It began with a look, brief, unspoken, but powerful enough to stop a room. When Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson locked eyes at a recent Hollywood event, there was something different. It wasn't the usual red carpet chemistry between two co-stars. It was deeper, softer, and far too real to ignore. Cameras flashed, fans screamed, and within minutes, social media exploded. Are they finally admitting it? To understand why this moment broke the internet, you have to go back to where it all started, the set of 50 Shades of Grey. Back then, both were young, focused, and determined to prove themselves beyond the characters they played. But somewhere between the endless rehearsals, the awkward intimacy of filming, and the quiet conversations that only two people under the same pressure could share, something began to bloom. It wasn't the kind of love that demanded attention. It was quiet, cautious, and hidden behind the professional masks they wore so well. People noticed. Crew members spoke in hushed tones about the way Dakota's laughter softened whenever Jamie walked by, or how his eyes would follow her, just a little longer than necessary. Yet, whenever the press asked, they both smiled politely and said, "We're just good friends." That phrase became their shield, and their secret. Years passed. Both pursued different lives, different partners, different projects. But the public couldn't forget what they saw on screen. The undeniable electricity that no script could create. Even when Jamie spoke fondly of his wife Amelia, or Dakota appeared with other Hollywood names, the whispers never really faded. Then came the subtle signs no one could ignore. A brief reunion at an awards show. A smile shared during an interview that looked far too intimate. A behind-the-scenes photo where Jamie's hand rested on Dakota's back just a second too long. The internet did what it does best. It noticed, analyzed, and speculated. Still, both of them kept silent. They let the rumors swirl like smoke, refusing to confirm or deny. Maybe it was respect, maybe fear, or maybe they weren't ready to face what everyone else already knew. But that silence cracked recently. A fan-recorded video surfaced online, a candid moment backstage at a private event. Jamie, relaxed and smiling, reached out and brushed a strand of hair from Dakota's face. She laughed, touching his hand in return, whispering something that made him grin like he hadn't in years. The clip was only a few seconds long, but it spread like wildfire. The caption under the video read, "We couldn't hide it anymore." For millions of fans who'd followed their story from the beginning, those words hit like lightning. It was everything they had suspected, everything they had secretly hoped to be true. The connection that had once been just a fantasy on screen now felt heartbreakingly real. Entertainment outlets rushed to cover the story. Paparazzi scoured every public appearance, hoping for another clue. Jamie and Dakota, as always, stayed quiet. But this time, there was no denial. No carefully crafted PR statement, no polite dismissal. Just smiles that said more than any words could. And maybe that's what makes it so compelling. Because love, especially in the harsh light of fame, rarely survives without breaking. Yet somehow, theirs did, silent, patient, waiting for the right moment to be seen. As the world debated whether it was true or not, one thing became impossible to deny. The way they looked at each other still carried the same spark as it did a decade ago. Perhaps, after all these years, they realized there was no point pretending anymore. Maybe the truth was simple. They never stopped caring, never stopped feeling, and finally, they decided the world could see it. And that's where everything changed. When the whisper that started years ago became the confession that no one expected, but everyone was waiting to hear. The world held its breath after that video went viral. For days, headlines screamed their names, Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson, the truth revealed. Every magazine, every entertainment outlet wanted answers. But the two remained silent. And yet, in that silence, something spoke louder than any public statement ever could. Jamie was the first to appear again, at a charity gala in London. He looked calm, composed, but there was something new in his demeanor, something freer. When a journalist cautiously brought up the rumors, expecting him to deflect as always, he smiled softly and said, "Sometimes, life writes stories you can't keep private forever." That single line sent shockwaves through the room. It wasn't a confirmation, but it wasn't a denial either. It was, as fans said online, the quietest confession ever made. For years, he had been known as the man who guarded his personal life fiercely. But those who truly followed him could sense the change. Fame had taught him how heavy secrets could become, especially when those secrets were tied to someone who once knew him better than anyone else. Meanwhile, Dakota was in Los Angeles, attending a film premiere. Cameras followed her every step, her every word. When a reporter mentioned Jamie's quote, she paused, just for a moment, before answering with a soft smile. "There are things you don't need to explain when they come from the heart." That was it. 2 sentences, oceans apart, yet perfectly aligned. Fans called it their unspoken confirmation. Over the next few weeks, old photos resurfaced, candid shots from behind the scenes of 50 Shades, interviews where their eyes lingered a little too long, clips where they laughed like no one else was in the room. Each moment became a piece of the puzzle that fans had been trying to complete for years. But beneath the noise, the truth was much simpler, and far more human. Jamie and Dakota had shared something real, something fragile, during a time when they weren't ready to face it. Hollywood, with its flashing lights and endless scrutiny, wasn't kind to quiet hearts. They had chosen silence, not because they didn't care, but because they cared too much. Now, after years of running from the rumors, it seemed they had stopped hiding, not by making a grand announcement, but by simply being. Sources close to them described a peaceful kind of reunion, long conversations, laughter, a sense of understanding that time hadn't erased. One insider claimed that Jamie once said, "With her, it always felt like coming home." And perhaps, that's what this was all about, not rekindling something new, but acknowledging something that never truly ended. Of course, not everyone believed it. Some called it media exaggeration, others insisted it was just nostalgia. But even the skeptics couldn't ignore the undeniable chemistry that resurfaced whenever they were in the same room. During a recent interview for a new project, Jamie was asked if he still keeps in touch with Dakota. He chuckled, looking down briefly before replying, "Some people never really leave your life. They just stay in a different way." The internet went wild. Fans quoted that line, calling it the most romantic non-answer in history. Behind the glamour, behind the drama, what emerged was something surprisingly pure. 2 people who had once shared a rare connection, finding peace in finally acknowledging it. Whether it meant love rekindled or simply love remembered didn't matter. What mattered was the truth in their eyes, the honesty in their smiles. In a world that constantly demands definitions, are they together? Are they not? Jamie and Dakota seem to be saying something different. Love doesn't always need a label. Maybe that's why their story resonates so deeply. Because everyone, at some point, has had a love they couldn't define, a bond they couldn't explain, or a connection they couldn't hide, no matter how hard they tried. As the lights fade on another red carpet, Jamie turns to Dakota, sharing a quiet laugh that only they understand. No words, no declarations, just 2 people who have stopped pretending. And in that moment, amid the flash of cameras and the whispers of a world obsessed with their secret, it's finally clear. They never needed to hide it in the first place.